So Creative Fighter went through a lot of improvements this year. This year we went through, last year if you remember, half of the fighters in the game were created via the Creative Fighter system. This year all 100 plus roster fighters received the same photorealistic treatment. So as a result, the Creative Fighters had to stand up to those guys, and they went through improvements as well. We touched every Creative Fighter part, made improvements to make sure the visual quality of the Creative Fighters matched up. You can see here we can pick first names and last names as well as nicknames. That's something new from this year. We actually have this concept the game is watching you. You'll get call-outs based on your first name and last names in the game, actually from Goldie and Buffer. You can obviously enter these on your own if you want, but the template names give you the opportunity to have more kind of immersion in the game. We have about 100 first and last names and about 50 nicknames, so a big improvement from last year's system. I should say 100 each, first and last year. Obviously you can pick where you're fighting out of. A lot of different opportunities to kind of create exactly the fighter that you want to be. So body and facial construction, as I touched on earlier, we did go through and touch every single part, make sure that the guys stacked up better this year. There's a lot more nuance, a lot more variety available to you in creating your fighter. Obviously we have the weight class selections that you see here. We also cap the attributes for each weight class, as you notice. There's certain weight classes, obviously, that you would think the heavyweights have a tendency to be a little stronger, and subsequent changes go into the game as well in that regard. Body types got a lot of attention this year, making them more realistic. Obviously, as I mentioned, to stack up against the roster fighters. A lot more variety, more parts this year. This is something that we really hope kind of goes into the playing up the community side. You can see here a ton of hair options. There's even long hair in the game this year. That long hair. So a lot more options, and we really hope that this results in a lot more community investment this year. We have our community.ufcundisputed.com site where we're going to do a lot of things like set up templates, show people how to make amazing looking creative fighters, and with the choice of making our roster fighters different this year, you can see here our color system is a lot more nuanced. We have the sliders instead of the static boxes from last year, so you can literally go through and adjust color, hue, saturation, however you want to do it. Again, we wanted to make sure that you have more variety, more options available to you. Obvious improvements to the various facial construction that you can do, set up brow types. You can add little fades in the eyebrows. This is where I usually shine. I get the fades on in the eyebrows. The sideburns as well. The arrow sideburn is my favorite. So again, I mean, you can see every aspect of the game. We give you complete control over the geometry. I mean, there's sliders, and again, this is going back to the community thing that we talked about. We really want people to kind of invest in these characters. I mean, you could spend hours getting in here, adjusting every little tweak to the geometry, and you're obviously going to have a chance to do this when we play the game later on tonight. But again, we really wanted to make sure that we give people all the options available to create their fighter. You can even pick your touch glove sequence if you like. We mocapped a lot of these animations, even so much as your fighter call when Buffer introduces you. You give a little performance to the crowd. Even so far as your victory scene. This one's my favorite, showing off how this happened. I like that one. Again, so a lot of options. And one of the things this year is that we're really allowing you to essentially apply what move you want to what controller input you want. You can see here I can go on the taunts, put which taunt I want in the controller, but that also applies to how we do various other things in the game that we'll get to in a second. Tattoo and logo placement, as well as sponsor placement, got a lot more got a lot of attention, obviously. Last year, you may remember, we had these sort of static slots where you could place things on, and we went with a more drag and drop system this year, which we felt was important. You can see here I can just pull a piece of art in, slide it across scale with the analog sticks. Much more easy to actually access. We obviously looked at the menu design, how that's actually utilized in the gameplay. You may remember last year we had a ton of menus to go down to. Obviously the tattoo system from last year, a lot of options. You can actually layer these things, so that's important to try out when you're creating your character. Try layering various tattoo shapes on one another, and you'll be able to create these very complex designs as well. But you can see I can just jump in, drag and drop. That applies to the shorts as well. We have a ton of the major sponsors from the UFC in the game. You get base clothing from a sponsor. And then the same drag and drop system applies to putting logos in your shorts. If you played last year, we had that slot system. We made it a lot more freeform. Here you can see I can just drag and drop a logo anywhere I want, place it, scale it. and adjust. And as you go through your career, you're able to unlock different sponsors and logos. We have tiers of unlocking this year. So, for example, you can unlock a sponsor and get some of their clothing at the very beginning of your career, and then later on you'll be able to unlock various other aspects so that you're not prevented from getting, say the Tap Out sponsorship last year was kind of at the end of your career. Fighting styles, this is actually one of the coolest things that we've done in the game this year. You may remember last year we had this archetype system where you're a boxer, one striking, one grappling technique. And we've gone with a much more a la carte approach to creating your fighter, as well as how the roster fighters are created. So you can actually pick, here in the creative fighter, you can pick your stance. We mocapped all of these stances, so that adds to the variety of the movement, and the fighters, they're going to look different from one another, they're going to move different from one another. And we give you, obviously all these nuanced options to actually create how your fighter is going to move. But this also applies to the roster fighters as well. And touching back on that idea that we eliminate the archetype system, we actually allow you to pick specific moves from various disciplines. We'll get into that here in a sec. You can pick your fight stance. Southpaw is in the game. Southpaw switching is in the game. Yay, sarcastic applause. Obvious omission from last year, but we felt we needed to get it right to make it work correctly. This is something that was kind of working last year, but we got it in for this year when we got it right. Obviously the southpaw switching, you can set that up. Handedness comes into play as well. You can set what hand is your dominant hand. You can be a southpaw fighter, fight with your lead hand, right hand being your power hand. You're not going to have the serious knockout jab, but your jabs will be stronger, and conversely your backhand will take on less power and strikes. So going back to the move acquisition, as I mentioned, done, gone is the archetype.